Hello, everyone, and welcome to SCORE Fairfield County's live webinar. Today, the subject is running a business post-COVID, actions, tactics, and questions. I'm Steve Smith, co-chair and a business mentor at SCORE Fairfield County, and I'll be your host today. Our presenter is Matt Krieger, and I'll give you a little bit more on Matt in just a second. Important note, this is the first of a continuing series of webinars specifically directed at the subject of restarting your business in a more COVID lenient environment. I chose the word lenient because I couldn't figure out a better word to use. Others upcoming will be on May 15th and May 18th. More are being planned. You will not have received an email on these webinars as they're under development as we speak. So you're going to have to stay abreast of them via our website, fairfieldcounty.score.org. Usually at this time, I talk a little bit more about SCORE, but I'm going to skip that and just move on because I want to make sure we give Matt all the time that he needs. Our next live webinar is on May 12th. Yes, that would be tomorrow at noon. And the topic will be Accelerating Your Business Growth with Christopher Salem presenting. You've already received the specifics, but in case you haven't, you could go to fairfieldcounty.score.org to get the information and to register. You'll also find a large number of archived webinars, or on demand, as we call it, covering a wide range of business topics. So some hints about today's webinar. We've set aside time for Q&A at the end of the presentation. If you have a question, please use the chat window at the bottom of your Zoom screen and post your questions there. This webinar will end sharply at 1 p.m. in respect of everyone's time. The session is being recorded, and the link to the recording will be available at fairfieldcounty.score.org within the next couple of days, probably tomorrow. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker. Matt Krieger is a technologist and executive with experience in IT, manufacturing, and publishing. He is currently VP of Technology for Kober Manufacturing. He's held senior IT leadership roles at Time Magazine and Reader's Digest. Matt is also Chief Technology Officer for us here at SCORE Fairfield County in the chapter here, and he's on the SCSU Competitive Science Technology Advisory Committee. Matt is chair of Reader's Digest Partners for Site Foundation and is an advisor for Cyber Seniors. He frequently presents on topics of business and technology, and he created Whisper, a platform serving web content as text-to-speech podcast. Matt, I'm going to turn it over to you now.
Thanks, Steve. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, good.
Terrific. So good morning. So this presentation was informed by my own experiences running Kober in Stratford. We're a manufacturer of industrial equipment, large-scale industrial equipment for heating and drying applications. We've been impacted by COVID. We see the impact to the business in terms of customer delays and a softening of the market. We've taken the payroll protection program funding from the government. And so it's those experiences and those thoughts that I have moving forward that have informed this presentation, and I hope to share them with you today. So there are a couple themes that are going to run throughout the presentation. One is that you really should be looking at your business and looking at the market through a completely different lens, not really looking at it as saying when things get back to normal, but rather taking a complete reevaluation of your business and of your markets as things may have fundamentally changed. It's unclear what the future will be, but certainly we should prepare for similar events and similar disruptions. COVID is just one type of disaster that can happen. And one of the very important themes here is that flexibility and resiliency toward future events is very, very important to get into your mindset. It's very hard to think about these things when things are going well. Now we have the shock of this, and we have the ability to plan for the future. So let me quickly cover some overall questions that I suggest that you ask yourself about your business and about your market. So we're emerging from COVID now. Hopefully you're still operating. One of the questions is, does your current business model make sense? Is it time to pivot to something else? Am I looking at my customers differently? Am I marketing differently as a result? Certainly if I'm a food service business, the answer to all those questions is probably yes, or at least most of them is yes. Are there new opportunities that can happen as a result? This presentation just isn't about minimizing damage. It's about creating opportunity in the future. Once again, the resiliency theme comes up, both in terms of financial and operational. We're going to see that throughout. The competitive landscape may have changed. It's likely that many of your competitors will not be in business anymore. And while that's not a happy thing for them or their employees, the reality is it could make new markets and new customers available to you. If you have staff, your approach to hiring them, to locating them, to outfitting them with tools could be different. You might be a remote first work environment where everybody works from home as opposed to goes to an office. You might have to ask the hard questions, of course, of can I still be in business? Really, everything should be reevaluated at this point. Okay, so this presentation is going to span these areas. And in general, I look at these areas as encompassing your business functions, and I suggest that as we move through each of the areas, that you actually think of them all, because there's a lot of common themes, as we said before. We will start with financial. As I think Budley and Steve said before, please feel free to put questions in the Q&A window, and we'll address them as appropriate. So on the financial side, so we're coming out of this, clearly one of, if not the most important survival element of this whole crisis has been cash, cash, cash. I think those who have survived were able to preserve their cash. That will be as crucial now, moving forward as it is now. Suggest that you look at your runway. Suggest now that as you're coming out and as your creditors are continuing to bark, you'll need to prioritize your obligations. Some are going to have to be paid first. Some are going to suffer, and that may in turn hurt you as well. But you're going to have to make those choices. We're making those choices here today, and sometimes they're hard, and sometimes they backfire. But I think resiliency, as we've said before, is the name of the game. How can we create a financial situation, whether it's through loans or lines of credit or other mechanisms that allow us to withstand situations like this in the future in a more resilient way. Suggest that when you look at your finances, and this really applies to all these areas again, but suggest that you, once again, look at your finances through a new lens. And the lens is partly one of the uncertainty of trying to predict the future, which is very difficult, but also obviously based on what you know now. For my business, for example, it's currently unclear to me which of my customers will emerge and start buying and when. I see companies in the food service business who have similar uncertainties. I see SCORE clients who are in the online software business. They were impacted less. regardless, maybe it's obvious, but I think that you need to look at your finances through this new lens of uncertainty and trying to predict the future, as we all claw back. Making good use of your cash now, obviously very important. If you've taken payroll protection program money from the government, you're going to want to make sure that you use that money according to a plan, as opposed to ad hoc, particularly if you don't plan to pay that money back, but rather be forgiven. You'll want to keep good records and stay clean. So you may want to get advice from your accountant. It's a mistake that we have made before, and many people do too. We wait until we need it to get capital, and we've learned that lesson now. And after getting beaten by it multiple times, and I suggest that if you need cash, don't wait. Get that line of credit now, or other mechanisms. With cash being critical, being the topic of the day, I think it's important to look at your customers. We're looking at our customers. We're ranking them in terms of their ability to pay. We're not only ranking them in a spreadsheet exercise, but obviously we're talking to them and we're trying to figure out where we want to put our energies and how we can collect. Despite all the belt tightening that is necessary, that we have to do right now, probably a bias toward marketing investments is, or can be, very critical right now. I suspect that with the competitive landscape changing, many competitors going out of business, consumer spending changing, that a bias toward marketing investments could potentially pay off very, very well. Not to mention, just to let your customers know that you are alive, because there is a lot of uncertainty today. And just raising your hand, touching your customers, which we're going to talk on later, is something that I recommend and is very important. It's also good time, I think, for a general financial health check. Look at your insurances, look at other programs you have. If you've had business continuity insurance, you've likely discovered that it probably does not cover what we're going through. So you should think about those things in the future as well. One of the questions from the audience was, what does runway mean? Runway means, based on my current spending, how many months can my business survive? Whoops. Okay, so we move from financial to operations. One of the first things that we were hit by in our own business is lack of capability and lack of operation on our supplier side. Supply chain is obviously critical to any business. If your supply chain is disrupted, you cannot offer your service. So we're looking at orders we have in the queue with our suppliers. Where our cash is tied up, we're asking if our suppliers can meet those obligations, and we recommend you do the same. We're also looking and saying, what are our most important suppliers? What are the greatest sources of volatility? How can we protect against those sources in the future, potentially by diversifying the suppliers that we go with, and building relationships also that are more tolerant to disruptions. Recommend that when you look at your operations, that you ensure that your employees have the tools and technology that they need. Many companies who were used to operating in an office and then were forced to have their employees stay at home, I witnessed many of them not have the right tools and the right infrastructure for their employees to operate remotely. And nothing is more draining on a business than employees who cannot work efficiently and don't have the right tools. And so I urge you to consider, from a technology point of view, what that means to work remotely. So these are some actions we took, and I recommend you do them as well. Look at your suppliers, talk to them. Who are the most important? Are they healthy? Are they operating? Can they meet their commitments to you? Do they have your cash? What does that mean in terms of the safety of that money? I mentioned looking at sources of volatility. What I mean there is that there are more there are riskier parts of your supply chain, and there are less risky. And not only should you look at the individual supplier health, but you should consider, I would recommend, to look at which parts of the supply chain would have the greatest impact on your ability to deliver service. Even if the suppliers of that service are healthy, look at other factors that could influence um, uh, or cause a risk in that area, and focus on those areas of risk. We talked about supply chain diversity. Uh, and a very, very important thing, and this is hard for many small businesses, and it's certainly hard for mine, is if there was any time to evaluate your internal business processes and identify those which are most critical, shore them up, ensure that you're flexible, potentially eliminate others, it is a good time to do it now. If you do not have your business processes identified and documented at all, it is also a very, very good time to do it now. One of the things I've witnessed being part of SCORE for a while is that many small businesses, they don't identify their business processes in terms of the function. They identify them in terms of the person who does them. And the problem there is that the knowledge is in that person's mind. When that employee leaves, it's not institutionalized as part of the business. So I recommend looking at those processes, identifying them functionally today, and assign them to people as necessary. But the process is the center, not the name doing it. We had a question in the chat room about what is business continuity insurance. Business continuity insurance is coverage that you can purchase from your insurance provider, which will cover you in the event that, for depending on the situation, that you are able to continue operations. So for example, if you have a key supplier outage and you're not able to make a commitment, it is possible that business continuity insurance could help you over that. If you have a fire or a flood in your building and your operations are compromised, it's possible that business continuity insurance could help you there. So let's talk about employees. Our businesses are nothing without our people. So here we are today. Hopefully your staff are okay. You're going to have to evaluate bringing them back. Do you need them back? What do your work conditions look like? If they're coming into a physical space, will you have to, you'll have to ensure the safety of that space. Distancing, staggered schedules, a cleaning routine. These are all things you'll have to think about. I mentioned it before. One of the things that is as important now to think about as ever is, do you have critical business knowledge that only exists in some key employee's mind? And if so, that's a big risk. It's time to capture that, especially today with the volatility being what it is. One of the hard things that I see businesses and their employees going through today is what the staffing picture is going to look like as we emerge. One of my observations, both from reading the news and in talking to colleagues, is that many entrepreneurs, many businesses are finding that they will not need to replace the same number of positions as they had to potentially eliminate as they went into COVID. That's a scary thing. It's certainly not good for the worker, but it is a reality. And one of the things that I see business owners doing is reassessing the work that had been done after employees were let go, reevaluating whether or not those functions need to exist. Do they need to exist in an employee? Can they be outsourced? Can the activity not be done at all? So those are critical questions as an entrepreneur that I suggest you ask. If you have a physical space where employees come into, layout of that space is important. The density of your workers working is very important. Giving employees and customers a sense that your operation is clean and that you're following best practice guidelines is going to be more important than ever, particularly in places like food service and barbershops and other health-related facilities. Many businesses in the face of COVID were forced to being remote native. What do I mean by remote native? By remote native, I mean where everybody can work virtually, everybody can work from home without having to be in the office. That is not just a function of technology. It is a culture change too. It is potentially a different kind of person you're hiring. It is a function of remote etiquette. It is a function of home office setup, and it is an attitude change. I believe that most businesses that are administrative in nature, let's say service businesses, should have a remote native culture. It doesn't mean that you don't have an office, but you should have the ability to work efficiently remotely as well. And as I said, that's a culture change as well. Okay, let's talk about customers, which is of course the reason that most businesses are alive today. There has been so much carnage in small businesses today that customers may not know that you're operating. I encourage you to touch those customers individually, not just through mass marketing campaigns, but individually. Let them know you're alive. Let them know you're operating. Let them know you're still there. I think that is going to go a long way, based on not only the fact that you are touching them individually with a human touch, but the fact that the competitive landscape may be substantially changed. You need to ask what the status of your customer base is. You need to look at the markets and industries they're in. So, we're a bit unusual as a small business in that we serve an industrial client base. It's a little easier for me to look at their future because I can read it in the news. I can see changes in the industry. It may be a little more difficult when it comes to small business. You're going to have to talk to your customers. You're going to have to research. There's no way around that. It's possible that your customer base is going to change here. You may be appealing to a different clientele than you did before. I use food service as an example. You may be appealing to a eat-at-home clientele in a delivery business greater than a eat-in business. Those are things to think about. We talked about ranking customers in terms of your ability to collect from them and your ability to serve them. These are hard things. Nobody likes to do it, but when customers have debts outstanding, obviously you have to make hard choices about what services you continue to provide and what type of credit you extend. Marketing efforts are something that may change substantially. If you were a business that depended on foot traffic, you are going to be likely forced into digital marketing efforts more than you ever were. We're going to get to that a little bit on the next slide, but certainly looking at your marketing is critical. So, recommendations. Figure out how your customer base is going to change. Who are you going to lose? Who is potentially a new customer to you? What other business opportunities are there? If, for example, you are a provider of cleaning services, can you establish a niche today in cleaning to a COVID spec? Potentially that's an opportunity for you. People's sensitivities have changed during this time of COVID. Can you appeal to those sensitivities with new products and services? As I said, this is not just about damage control, it's about new opportunities. As I mentioned, you will be even further pushed to doing digital marketing. If as a small business you do not have a website today, you absolutely must. You should have anyway, and you still should. Increasingly, that digital presence is very, very important. And I will say that the vast majority of small business people that I work with, whether it's uh, uh, whether it's the gutter cleaner or the painter, they don't have websites. I think that is challenging moving ahead, and I encourage you to make a minimal website. SCORE has many programs on that, and you should look at them. This concept of being a remote first business comes up again, not only for employees, but for your customers. If you have a storefront and you continue to have a storefront, you still should be able to provide your services virtually and remotely. This applies not only to selling, but to customer service. All those channels should really be available digitally and in a remote first way, meaning that you're not in the office. And of course, just like on the employee side, customers are going to demand a safe physical space when they come into your office, and you'll have to figure out how to provide that. Okay, let's talk about competition here. The competitive landscape likely will have changed substantially. Many of your competitors will have gone out of business. The fact that you have survived means that you have a fundamental strength that you can take advantage of. It sounds cutthroat, but I think it's the reality. It's business. If your competition, if some of that competition is gone, those are customers and markets that you can potentially fill, and you should be asking yourself, how can you fill those gaps? There's other competitive opportunities here, other market opportunities. There's new social norms now. There's new expectations. How can I use those in my marketing campaigns to better deliver services and products to my customer and better compete? Recommended actions. I mentioned this a moment ago. You've survived. You have a fundamental strength. You've probably managed your cash well. See if you can use that to build the health of your business, to hire more people, to employ more people. Grab a bigger piece of the pie if your competitors have disappeared or are no longer serving a market or a customer base. Look at those areas that are unaddressed in the market and try to fill them. And I come back to the recommendation that if there is any time to increase your marketing effort while the competition is compromised, it is now. So that is an area of investment that I would recommend. So we're going to wrap up this this short webinar today with a summary set of recommendations and hopefully a set of consistent themes. Look at your business fresh. Things have changed. It's potentially different rules, and you should look at things out of a new lens. Flexibility and resiliency are absolutely key. They are key in your financial area. They are key in your operations. They are key in how you manage employees and how you manage an office space. They are absolutely key in everything that you do. And so flexibility and resiliency, I think, are one of the terms and the key aspects of the day. You're likely having to do a financial review now in any case, and I urge you to do that as rigorously as possible. If you don't have a small business accounting system, I recommend that you implement that. Very simple, very cheap, gives you a set of disciplines and forces you to look at your books. Things will change in terms of the way you physically interact with your customers and the way you physically interact with your employees and the way that you digitally interact with your customers' employees. Things will change as a result of many of the obvious things we've been talking about. Services will be expected to deliver more virtually. Delivering services virtually is not simply a matter of getting on Zoom or having a website. It's a change in culture. It's a way of rethinking how you deliver your service. And I encourage you to think about those types of transformational things. Technology is only part of the problem. There has to be culture change in order to solve those issues. Touching your customers, I raised as a key point. Let them know you're alive. Let them know you're healthy. I think they'll appreciate it, and I think that you will see benefit from it. Furthermore, as a result of that change in competitive landscape, as well as from some of the sensitivities that COVID brings to the table, cleanliness, being remote, low physical touch requirement. I mean, obviously, I think we're going to see big movement in terms of things like touchless payments, touchless transactions. I think you should be thinking about how those affect your business and integrate them in. Important. This speaks to resiliency and flexibility. I want to come back to the business continuity plan. I recommend that every business, regardless of how big or how small, or I should say particularly how small, have a business continuity plan. A business continuity plan addresses the question of, how do I maintain my operations? How do I maintain the delivering of service, the collecting of money, the employment of my people, the payment of my obligations in the event of a disaster? And what I recommend you do, and by the way, there are SCORE series on business continuity plans. Small business has resources as well. They don't need to be complicated, but they do need to be something you think about. And what I recommend is, when you think about a business continuity plan, think about them under the lens of your financials, your operations, your employees, your customers. And for each of those areas, say to yourself, how are they impacted if there's a new COVID? If my space becomes unavailable because I have a flood, if there's a natural disaster, if I have a reputation hit, if a supplier goes out of business, I urge you to take each of those situations and say, can I operate financially? Where are my gaps? Let me address those gaps. Can I fulfill my customer obligations vis-a-vis my supply chain? Can I pay my employees? Do I have facilities to work if my office is flooded? Can I deliver my product and service? I recommend looking at things through that lens, and it will make you more resilient in the future. So I thank you for your time today. I hope that this webinar was valuable at a high level. As Steve said at the beginning, there will be a series of 3 follow-on webinars which dive into deeper areas, and we welcome any questions now.
Thank you, Matt. This is Steve again. We do have one question, but before I get to that, I do want to reiterate what Matt just said, is that, we wanted to get some restart information out there as fast as we could. So we decided to have this kind of like high level a look. And you'll see the upcoming webinars will dive more deeply into each of the functional areas that Matt has laid out for you in the last 35 minutes. Point number 2, to Mark Filippo. What options does SCORE have in website development? Okay, number 1, we don't do website development at SCORE. We don't do that kind of thing. But we have had a series of webinars on this subject over the last 12 months. And I would strongly encourage you to go to fairfieldcounty.score.org, click on webinars, workshops, and you'll see on demand. They're called on demand webinars. Click there and just kind of scroll through it, and you can find one. I think we've had one on this subject actually in the last 60 days, right prior to COVID. And of course, you can always contact the people who are presenting in those webinars as well for more detailed information. Let's see, Zachary has a question. Good question, actually, Matt. I'm going to read this question very slowly and give you a chance to think about it while I read it. Do you have an example of what a business continuity plan looks like?
So Zachary, thanks for that question. Shoot me an email to the email address on the screen, and I'll send you an example. one of the most important and aspects of any business continuity plan that you look at is going to be breadth. That is, it really considers all aspects of your business. I've seen plans that are named business continuity plans, but really focus on technology, and technology is not enough. So business continuity means being able to have resiliency in all aspects of your business. And I think I can send you a couple of templates for that. So please feel free to email me, and I will send that information on.
Yeah, I think Zachary, Steve Smith again. Yeah, that's a really good question, and thanks, Matt, for offering to personally answer that. Since I have some say in these things at SCORE, that's something we're going to make sure that we put in our financial module about restarting your business, because I think it's really important, but it's actually been important, right? I mean, it was a Sandy thing. It's, you know, it's going to happen. It's just a matter of when, and it's hard to get your brain around things that when they're not happening. But this is a kind of a rude wake up call to the fact that everyone, regardless how small your business is, does need a plan. So thanks, Matt, and we'll get you more detail on that in one of our upcoming webinars on restarting your business.
By the way, talking about continuity, I saw a comment earlier, or it was a question about whether business continuity insurance would it have covered you during COVID? I'm not an insurance provider, but I'm pretty confident that the answer is no. We were notified as such by our insurance provider. I think, and this is just me editorializing, but I think that the industry, the private insurance industry, is not set up to manage events like this. They're more likely to address issues like fire and flood and things like that. So I hope that info is helpful.
Yeah. So.
Oh, one of our mentors, Melissa, just posted a link in the chat about a business continuity plan example. So you'll see that link there. Thanks a lot, Melissa, for that.
Good, great. Any other questions for Matt? Well, you're letting him off the hook too easily, I think. But you can. I'm going to give the wrap up, but you can still put your questions in, and we'll go right back to him. So I just want to thank Matt for this, and just as a reminder that this webinar was recorded, and the materials, including the slides, will be available, if not later today, tomorrow. Also note that our next live webinar is on Tuesday, that's tomorrow, at noon. And the topic is Accelerating Your Business's Growth with Christopher Salem. And again, I want to just point out that SCORE does offer, in addition to these webinars via Zoom, individual counseling that we're now doing via Zoom as well. And when you go to fairfieldcounty.score.org, you can click on Request a Mentor and register, and a mentor will reach out to you and try to help you with your question. Will help you with your question. Also, you're going to be getting an evaluation at the end of this session, so please fill that out and return it to us. It's very important, especially in this case, because we're starting this series, now, and we will be running it, probably through the end of June. So anything that kind of stimulated your creativity or your questions that you want answered, send them off back to us, and we can still incorporate them into the curriculums that we're building. I hope that makes sense to you. So I'm looking.
I see a question from Mohammed.
Yeah.
So Mohammed, your question: should you seek to borrow more money even if you are not making money now? my answer may be unsatisfying, which is that it depends. I would say if you're not making money, potentially the bigger question is can you borrow money? Um, I I think I would recommend that you talk to your financial person. If you're not making money now, I would suggest that the monies you are borrowing are less about working capital potentially and more about an investment in your business. But without the full information, I don't know. I would certainly encourage you to explore the situation and talk to your accountant and talk to your bank and see what the options are. I think one of the critical questions to ask is again, how can you achieve resiliency in the future with working capital so that you can continue to pay your debts and operate and deliver your services. Whether you are when you say you're not making money now, I don't know whether that means if you're not profitable or if you don't have revenue. Again, all of that depends, but I encourage you to have those conversations and explore further.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good answer, Matt. And by the way, do we have this question about business continuity site answered here? I see a lot of back and forth on this when I was talking before. It appears that we do have the link from there, Matt, the last one. Melissa sent it and then Matt sent it again. So I think we're good on that. So I'm going to go ahead and end this webinar now. And thank you very much, Matt, for presenting on very, very short notice. And I know you got a lot of other things on your plate besides doing this. So a great big thanks to you on that. And I'd like to also thank everybody who attended today's meeting. And again, go to fairfieldcounty.score.org to take a look at upcoming webinars, both on restarting your business, as well as our on-demand webinars that can help you with some of your business operations. So thank you very much and have a healthy and safe day.